One of the fascinating personalities of the Torah is the Nazir, the Nazirite. This was a man or woman who decided to take an oath of abstinence. They had to abstain from strong drink, from wine or any grape products. They could not come into contact with the dead, even a close relative, and they were not allowed to cut their hair. The minimum time for Nazirut for this particular process was 30 days, but a person could specify as long as they wanted. At the end of that time, they would shave their hair and they would bring certain offerings to the temple, and then they could continue with life as they had before they had become a Nazir. A famous Nazirite, of course, was Shimshon, Samson, although he was a Nazirite from birth. And the question that the sages go into is it a positive thing to become a Nazir, a Nazirite, or is it a negative thing? The Torah seems to speak about it in a positive light, but is it something that's worthwhile doing? And perhaps to understand this, we have to look at a story in the Talmud. The story is narrated by Shimon HaTzadik. Shimon HaTzadik was a Kohen Gadol, the high priest, during the times of the Second Temple, at around about the same time that Alexander the Great was waging all of his wars. And Shimon HaTzadik said as follows: "My entire life, I never used to eat the sacrifice that was brought by the Nazir. When a Nazir ended their particular time, they would come to the temple and bring a sacrifice, and of course the Kohanim would be able to consume that, and certainly the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, was able to consume part of that sacrifice. But Shimon HaTzadik, this very righteous Kohen Gadol, he said, I never once my entire life ate of that sacrifice. I didn't believe in it. I didn't believe that becoming a Nazir was a good thing. There was only one time that I ate of that sacrifice. There was a young man who came from the south. He came into the temple. He had beautiful, long, flowing locks. And I said to him, my son, why are you now going to cut these locks? In other words, his question was, why did you become a Nazirite? And the young man said to me, I am a shepherd. I work for my father. I work in the south of Israel. And one day I was walking along with the sheep, and I passed by a well of water. And I looked into the well, and suddenly I saw my face. And my Yetzer Hara, my evil inclination, said to me, wow, you're such a handsome person. There is so much you could do. You could go out. You could be with the ladies. Go ahead and do it. And at that very moment, the young man said, I made a pledge and a vow that I would become a Nazirite. And ultimately, I would shave my beautiful locks. So Shimon HaTzadik said when he heard that, he got up, he stood up, he kissed this man on his head, and he said, there should be more Nazirites like you in the people of Israel. What does that whole story mean? Why did Shimon HaTzadik believe that becoming a Nazirite was something negative, but when it came to this young man from the south, he thought it was very positive? And the answer that's explained by our sages, in particular the Maharal, is as follows. Most Nazirites became Nazirites because they were reactive. Something had already happened to them, something negative. They had become involved in some negative behavior, which may have involved the drinking of wine or something else, and therefore they felt as sort of a cleansing process or a rehabilitation process, they had to now become a Nazirite. And yes, that's something that is wonderful and advantageous, but there's always a problem. They had done something wrong, and now they were going to change. There's always the possibility that they might just go back to their previous habits. And therefore, Shimon HaTzadik was wary. He wasn't 100% convinced that becoming a Nazir was the right path. Except this particular Nazirite, he wasn't reactionary, he was precautionary. Nothing had happened yet. He hadn't done anything bad. But at that one moment that he saw his reflection in the water, he said to himself, I have the potential for becoming a corrupt person, an arrogant person, a sinner. I want to stop that dead in its tracks. And therefore, prevention is better than cure. And that's why I'm becoming a Nazir. So that's what Shimon HaTzadik said about that young man. Such a person should become a Nazir because he's making sure to prevent bad behavior before it even begins. But there's something more that the Talmud tells us about the Nazirite. It says in the Torah, Al-Asher Chata ala Nefesh. He has sinned upon his soul. What does that mean that he has sinned upon his soul by becoming a Nazirite? And the Talmud tells us as follows. Because he took a vow of abstinence. Because he prohibited to himself something that is normally permitted. There are many prohibitions in the Torah. There are many things that we cannot do. There are foods that we cannot eat. There are activities that we cannot partake in. But there are things that the Torah says you are allowed to do. Go ahead and do them and enjoy them. What a Nazirite does now is that he removes himself even from what the Torah says is permitted. And the Talmud criticizes him for that. What, isn't it enough that the Torah has 613 mitzvot, that it has 365 negative commandments, that you have to go now create a new negative commandment? This is like a person who goes and builds a private altar for himself in his backyard and brings a sacrifice. That's not the Jewish way. We have to be part of the community. Even if we want to be stricter, we have to think to ourselves, if by being strict, am I going to separate myself from everybody else? Yes, I'm going to take on this higher degree of kashrut or whatever it may be. I'm going to take on a more modest way of dressing that is not required according to Jewish law. What are going to be the consequences? Maybe I'll become a more pious person, but I may separate myself from the community. And that's the question that we always have to ask. When we take on a stringency, is it going to assist us, or is it going to, in fact, be harmful to us because we are now separating ourselves from the community? And that's another reason why the Torah, in fact, frowns on a person becoming a Nazir. It gives them the opportunity. You want to do it, go ahead and do it. But is it necessarily a positive thing? No, because anything that will separate a person from the Jewish community is considered to be negative, even though it may increase within that person levels of piety. As Hillel tells us in Pirkei Avot, Al tifrosh min hatzibor. Never separate from the community. Do everything you can do and strive to be part of your community. I wish you a Shabbat Shalom.